Welcome to the Aligned Life Podcast by yours truly, Dr. Tiffany. How about we get out that magnifying glass and look at every part of your life, the awesome, the suck, and everything in between. There's so much beauty in you. Stop being afraid of what isn't good enough and let's double down on what is together. It's about your truth and your life, aligned. Hey guys, thanks for joining in again. Today we have a longtime old childhood friend. Oh, I don't mean she's old, but 30 years ago was a long time ago. Joelle Baehr is with us. She and I have connected the last few years through Facebook. This is what I love about social media, is the ability to reconnect with people and choose if you want them to be in your circle. And she's one that I've been following. I've been in awe with how she writes, not only what she writes, but how she writes. She has a gift that I cannot wait to share with you guys because her life has not been roses, but if you were to look at her now and hear her now and listen to her now, what she's overcome is by choice, and it's so beautiful. Like the pain, the thorns, the everything is beautiful. She talks about trauma. She talks about forgiveness, about triggers, about all the things that make us want to hide. They make us want to feel small, and why it's so important to know that you are destined for more and to allow that shadow side to come out so that you can heal and that you can give more love and more of your gifts to the people around you, the people that love you and the world. And so she speaks from a place of experience, from a level of trauma that most people haven't encountered in their lives. And I think this is such a testament to her trust in God, the trust and belief in herself that she didn't want to die like this. She wanted to rise above this. And the confidence and the courage that it took for her to continue to move through this. The people that she chose to be in her circle to help her through love and compassion is something that I will forever remember. This interview is powerful. It's humble. I wrote so many notes on concepts of understanding where people are coming from. And that is where I feel a huge blessing will be for you listening to our interaction. Of course, there's some giggles, there's some that's what makes us great. That's what brought us right back into 30 years ago. So I hope you enjoy this. I hope you take massive action from what she's been through and some of the suggestions that she has given to us. Hey guys, today we have Jo.
Yes.
Joelle, that's what I used to call you. So we got a blast from the past. Joelle and I played basketball together oh my gosh, it's coming up on 30 years, right?
30 years.
Oh my gosh. So she's grew up in the Devil's Lake area. We played basketball through high school. I kind of forgot that I graduated in the same high school that she graduated. So we're just going to ignore all that stuff. And we're going to talk about you. We're going to talk about your journey. We're going to talk about, as we talked about before we started recording, about the shadow that we all have that you had the courage to bring out and to heal and to start living your life in a way that you know you could, and by the values that you created for yourself, not for anybody else. And it's interesting. So we've been friends on Facebook for a long time, right?
Right. Yeah. Like 12 years.
Yeah. Right. Since, and that must be when Facebook started, because neither of us probably knew what we were doing. And before I invited you to this podcast, did you look at the last time I had sent you a message? It was 4 years ago.
Yes.
Complimenting on your writing that you should write a book.
Thank you. Yes. I do remember. I did look that up. Yep.
Weird. I'm like, that was already 4 years ago. So I say that to the people listening because you speak well, you talk well, I think one of the pieces that I admire about you the most is that you can talk about your story in a way that doesn't have shame, it doesn't have regret, it just is what it is. And so, as you know, there's not many people who can air their dirty laundry and be okay with where they were in order to get to where they are. So I want to talk about it all the suck, the awesome, and the lessons, and of course now the blessings that you are able to live with going through all of the stuff that you went through. So I'm going to give you the mic.
Sure.
Well, I might redirect because you like to talk as much as I like to talk, but
That's true. Keep me on task. Keep me going. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I have complex PTSD from some childhood trauma, but it haunted me for the majority of my childhood and teenage years. And when I say that I have complex PTSD from some childhood trauma, nobody really caught it at the time, but as I talk about it, anyone who knew me when I was younger, like, oh, that makes so much sense. Because there were so many behaviors and so many weird decisions and things that I did that just like defied all logic. And I think that for me, you know, looking back, when I would say that, a lot of people who probably didn't really understand how or why I became or got where I got, showed me an enormous amount of compassion and support, and really in some surprising places, like our old high school basketball coach, who dealt with the train wreck that was me on many a bus ride, was full of compassion for what I'd been through when I shared it with him. And, you know, it's just like everything in your life has a time and a place to come clean with, I think. Otherwise, it just eats you from the inside. And for me, it just became, I either acknowledge that some things happened and get to work on it, or I die here. Because for some,
I love that.
Maybe for all of us, it is, you have to figure out how to work through these things. You can't just sit and deny them anymore. And I think that's why we have anxiety, we have ulcers, we have fibromyalgia, we have autoimmune disorders, we have all these things. Quite frankly, I believe they're because we refuse to cope with the emotional damage that's been done, that we've done to ourselves and that people have done to us. And I did not want to live like that. I don't want to live in pain. I don't want my body to waste away. I love my body. And so that was really what kicked off some of it for me, was just to say, I don't want to live like this anymore. This is not a way to live. This is the way to die. And so I just started therapy, and it evolved into some really unique therapy treatments, reading a lot of books, doing a ton of work with a kinesiologist who really like honed in on my emotional baggage from how things made me feel and how they trickled into my adult life and decisions. And then really for the last decade, I've spent at least 1 or 2 hours a day working on my mind-body connection, which is just like, where does that feel like in my body? What emotion spurs what? When is my stomach doing flip-flops? What am I experiencing? And just really not judging that, just very curiously looking at it. And just realizing like, my survival brain has run my entire life, and that's why I make a lot of bad decisions, a lot of things I've slid back on that I should have been okay with. I think a lot of, especially people who are high achievers, I always wanted to be a high achiever, but I always had this like stop, start. Like this was the thing I was going to do. This was going to be it. This was going to fix everything. And then I would get going and I would get momentum, and then I would just sabotage myself every single time, over and over again. I mean, my dad still makes fun of me for like the 1,500 business ideas I started, and like all the boys I dated, and how I couldn't make up my mind about anybody or anything. And I thought, well, I mean, sure, when you're coming from a place of incredible trauma and a lot of survival brain, mechanisms, you're gonna flip-flop, you're gonna switch, you're gonna have periods of intense activity followed by like very low activity. And that's just been, those have been my goals for the last 10 years, is just to get to a place where I can be resilient and, live into my values and help other people live into theirs.
Okay, so I have a lot of things that I've written down so far, but can we talk about trauma?
Yeah.
When I hear that word, I hear of big stuff like child abuse, rape, death, car accidents, all those kind of things. Can you break down what that actually means? And through your therapy and all of the things that have helped mind-body connection, like the degrees of what that means and what it actually does to your brain and your body?
Yeah, so there's 3 kinds of trauma. So there's shock trauma, which is what we talk about when someone witnesses a death, as in a car crash, as in a plane crash. You know, we think of the big T's, we call them big traumas, right?
Yep.
And then there's childhood trauma, which is molestation, child abuse, neglect. If you're growing up with alcoholic parents and kind of drug abuse in the family, those are childhood traumas. And then there's relational trauma, which is a stressful job, doing too much, not respecting your body boundaries, you know, pushing yourself beyond. And we as Americans martyr people who go without sleep, who work themselves to death, who get into what we call dysregulation. So it's a form of dysfunction, but it's essentially just that you've overridden your body systems trying to tell you things for so long that your body has become traumatized. And all of that trauma gets in the tissue and starts malfunctioning. And so what you see a lot of people who, in my opinion, can have a combination of all 3. But if you're like a firefighter, you're a cop, you're a lawyer, you're just somebody who is a workaholic in general, you can have trauma without having had a bad childhood and without having ever seen a car crash or someone die. You can have, they call it adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. And there's a test you can take that tells you, it gives you a range. And if you're like 0 to 3 on an adverse childhood experience, you're probably fine. Like you could see a car crash and not be triggered by it. But if you're 4 or higher on that ACE test, you might see a car crash and it might totally wreck you. It might trigger you, it might remind you of something. And so when you see how like 2 people can be standing next to each other on a platform and see a train crash, and one is like, train crash happens, and the other one is like haunted, can't sleep, can't breathe, having anxiety attacks, can't get over it. Typically it's something from like an adverse childhood experience that's kind of kicked that in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So you've got little T's that can happen all the time. Your boss yells at you, you have a fight with your husband. And I think that people throw the word trauma around like maybe it gets to be annoying. But I think if you understand the 3 different buckets that trauma can go in, then you can have a little more compassion for people who are like, your actions traumatized me. When you can say like, how is that possible? I just told you you smelled bad. But like, well, maybe they grew up being told they smelled bad. And so now you've completely wrecked them and so you just don't know. And so it's just like, I respect anyone who uses the word trauma. I don't always understand it, but I respect it.
That is powerful, and that's part of my work is going back into those places of trauma. So just for you to describe them, I mean, even for me to be described like that, that is so helpful, because I can sense what's in a body. I can sense the health of their tissues. So when you say tissues, I can see the cells, I can feel all that. So you know that there has been that, but either it's been blocked, which trauma does, or you're all in the process of healing that, right? Or it's stuck in that shadow side. It's too scary to come out, scared of the unknown of what life will be like after you can uncover it. So I know you said that one of the big things was one of the big things that drove you to do it was, do I want to die like this?
Mm-hmm.
In your process of uncovering shadow, I just say shadow, but trauma, what was the most, like, where were the lessons? Where were the blessings? Where did you see progress? Because it can be so heavy, right? Like when we talked before we started recording, she did therapy, she did EMDR for 22 weeks. Results they happened the whole time a little bit, but from your perspective at week 19 was like, whoa, well, that is 5 months down the road.
Yeah.
So how many people quit? The majority of people quit way before they can actually see the lesson. So can you talk to that a little bit about not judging the time frame?
Yeah, it's a lifelong journey, and there'll be things that you'll learn to live with, and there'll be things that you'll get over, and they won't be the same. Like there's some certain kinds of trauma that I've learned to live with. I stopped trying to get over it. There's certain things that I'm confident I can get over. I work on those. I work on getting over that. But you know, the discernment between the two can be its own journey. It can take a long time. You might try really hard to get over something and then come to a point where like, that's just part of who I am. And what I've really found to be helpful is to say that all of it is welcome at my table. All of the pain, all of the crap, all of the beauty, all of the joy, all of the art, all of the confusion, all of the pain, all of the pleasure, all of it, it's all welcome at my table. How I digest and take it in after that, that's going to be up to me. But it's at my table and it's welcome. And I think the harder we try to stuff that and not look at it, especially the pain, the more it forces itself on us and the sicker we get. And so sometimes just in like a simple, I'm a Christian, and so I get a lot of flack for saying this, but I love meditation. It's kind of a non-negotiable for me because I just need to pay attention to my breath. Like sometimes I just need to, and like just appreciate that I still have it.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the recommendations I give to a lot of people who are like, well, I've got these hangups or these things and I just have tried and talk therapy doesn't work and nothing works. I would say just start with the simple thing of gratitude. Just start being grateful for things. I don't know, sometimes you can be grateful that your cereal tasted good or that you had hot water. You start with really simple little places where you find gratitude. And that really equated to me as little tiny places where I could grow and heal. But a lot of what you'll experience processing trauma is just seed planting. There'll just be someone will come along and they'll plant the seed and you won't see anything from it for a really long time. And then suddenly one day you'll be talking to someone and you'll be like, wow, that doesn't bother me anymore. That used to trigger me 100% of the time. Like sitting on a sidewalk with a busy street, every time a semi would come through, I would duck under the table. I don't do that anymore. You'd just be like, oh, I don't have any desire to duck under the table. Wow. Right. But you can't be like setting benchmarks. I say people who have trauma histories, you have to take goals and you have to just get rid of them.
Super interesting.
You aren't wired anymore to deal with the shame and failure of not reaching a goal. And it's not helpful because you'll get to that goal and your anxiety will have already digested and morphed it into the next goal. And you'll never be able to stop and really appreciate where you are. I think that people who aren't traumatized should have goals all the time. And I think that's wonderful. But people who are traumatized need to have more like intentions. Like I have an intention that I'm going to set that I'm not going to have any people in my life that diminish me by this time next year. And then I map out what that looks like. But for me to set a goal to make $1 million by 2018, 2019, 2020, no, like I'm never going to get that. And I'm just going to be disappointed and depressed. And so maybe intentions and goals for some people sound like saying the same thing in two different ways, but they're very different for me.
I like that. Because you're definitely a go-getter. So I want to just make sure people who are listening don't think that Joelle doesn't have goals for her life. You totally do, obviously, intentions. So how do you live in that way? So if you know that you're used to being a perfectionist and that didn't work, and you're used to starting and stopping, and now you're never good enough and you don't have the confidence that you can finish. I mean, the cycle, right? Now we have regret and we have anger and all this not good enough crap. Yeah. How do you set an intention? How do you live by that? And then how do you pivot when you need to?
Sure. So what has worked really well for me, and this has been a very long, like a 15-year refinement process, because I run a business. Everyone's like, what's your revenue goal? And I'm like, to be here next year. So from a business perspective, I know people kind of laugh at me, but really what I do is kind of the counter is that I look at what I burn the ships every year. I'll burn some ships down. Like, this isn't working for me. I got to get rid of it. So it is like in my mind, I'm just flicking a match on that. That's got to go. And how I discern that process for myself is what does it feel like in my body when I think about that? And if I had to rank it on a stress from 1 to 10, 1 being no stress at all and 10 being the most stressful, what does that feel like? What amount of stress does that bring me? And then is it worth it? Because sometimes a 10 out of 10 on the stress level is worth it because it's pushing you towards something that is going to change you forever. And sometimes it's going to kill you. But so you got to really like, I journal, I pray about it. I spend a lot of time meditating and just saying, whatever it is this for me? Is this for me?
Mm-hmm.
Because I can put up with just about anything if I know it's for me. And you get that confirmation, you burn those ships down and you go in the direction and you don't look back and you don't second guess and you don't doubt, you just do. And you don't give up. But you've taken the time on the front end, I think, to do that discernment and to really recognize the amount of stress it causes, whether it's worth it or not, and what can be a really plausible future outcome for this. Instead of, like I always said, you know, if I can be content, if I can be at peace, that was where I started like 10 years ago. It was contentment and peace. Now it's like, I kind of want to be uncomfortable. I want to be challenged. And then so I spend a couple of years being really uncomfortable and challenged. And then maybe I'm going to spend a few years with my goal being, who is in my life? Who am I letting into my circle? What are my boundaries even? But you can't do all that all at once. You have to start from a place of peace. And so once you're there and you're like, I have 90% of my life that I have agency over. Agency is so huge for people who have been traumatized. The idea that you do have power and that you do have control and that you can make choices, there's the biggest like aha moment of my life. But like, you know, you can do that if you want to, or you can decide not to do that. It was like, what? I can? I've spent my whole life just like, I didn't know I could choose that, because if I chose, then someone's going to be mad at me, or somebody's going to beat the crap out of me, or something bad's going to happen. Nope, you can decide. And that's like, that was a big game changer for me. And so not to say that I'm not motivated and that I don't have goals, I am, but I probably just need to look at it in a little bit more gentle, a little bit more spiritual. And like I said, intentions are something that can change when they need to. To answer your question about pivoting, I don't pivot. I'm not good at it. I really am a like, start that on fire and walk away and start something brand new over here. I think if it was broken then, it will be broken later. So pivoting is like, I wash my hands of it. I do know people who can do that successfully, and I'm in utter awe of them. And I think it's wonderful. I wasn't really, it's like in basketball, I never learned really how to dribble. People, they giggle, but like, what was the point really, Tiff? What would I have done with dribbling? Nothing. I didn't pivot. I'm huge. I catch the ball, I shoot the ball. Like, I have focus on that, you know? So like, for me, that translates into the rest of my life.
You seriously didn't dribble. You didn't dribble.
No, and I didn't. There's no point.
It's funny. Oh my gosh. Sorry, sidebar.
Yeah.
I love it. See, and so from my perspective, I think you pivot all the time. So
interesting. Tell me more about that.
I think with your level of discernment, it may be a different perspective, not a different idea. So you have so much discernment. I mean, more than the majority of people I know, to be able to really be in tune with, what do I want? How does it feel? Is this something I need to burn, or is this something I need to explore? And yeah, you might burn the ship, but I would just see it as a pivot. I actually don't see it as something else.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I've actually gotten jealous of people who can be like, well, that thing didn't work, so I just moved it over here a little bit. And I'm like, how do you do that? I'm just like an all or nothing gal.
But from your mind, if you were in that person's body that said that didn't work, you would say, burn it. Now I'm going to do this. Well, she just pivoted in like, we're going to do this instead. Well, you're like, yeah, I'm going to do this instead, but you see it as a new thing. That person
Sure.
just sees it as a right angle, right? 90-degree turn, man.
Right,
Not a
right.
360. It's
No.
not a travel in basketball.
I wouldn't know because
Oh my gosh, so funny. Okay, before we, there's so many things. Okay, so there's some things that I want to touch on, but I'm going to let you decide where they go.
Mm.
The seed planting, triggers, and forgiveness.
Yes.
Talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, I think seed planting is a huge, maybe for anybody, but to put yourself around people who are better, stronger, faster, smarter, more lovely, more spiritual, more loving than you could ever imagine yourself being, and let them plant seeds in you all the time.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't even know that's what you meant.
So whatever ideas, whatever wisdom, whatever time they want to spend with you, anything they want to gift you. I always say when I'm around women, especially who are really profound at things that I am not profound at or that I want to be, I would say big eyes, big ears, and a little mouth. I might ask a couple of questions for clarification, but I'm mostly just absorbing whatever I can that they're willing to give me, because, you know, a well-loved woman is a fierce thing. And when you get the opportunity to be around a woman who appreciates herself and who has good boundaries and who is strong, and I just like want to marinate myself in that and just like take in whatever they're willing to give me. So that seed planting for me is huge, and I'm always just incredibly honored by the people who've taken the time to teach me things all my life, but especially in my late, in the last decade. Forgiveness, there's no healing without forgiveness. I think we all know that. It's biblical. I can't move on until I forgive myself, which is the hardest one, and the people who've hurt me. I have no malice whatsoever for a single person. In fact, maybe the people who've done me the most harm growing up and in my adult life, I would give a hug if I saw them right now. Just have nothing but compassion for them. I don't want them in my life, but I have compassion for them. And
how do you get to that point?
How do you get to where they're not in your life, or you just have compassion?
All of it. How do you forgive somebody who you believe has wronged you the most? Now, like I get it, right? That's also brought you the best blessing and the best lessons if you're willing to bring it to the light. But how do you go there?
I mean, you just start by praying for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll write out prayers for people who I can't stand. I can't hate anybody I pray for. That's kind of rule number one. And then I do one of my core values is grace. And so I think grace is giving the most generous assumption to people as possible. So when someone hurts me, I think of what they may have gone through in their own childhood, what trauma they're wrestling with, kind of lifestyle they're living that they're truly ashamed of and they're lashing out. I always think that they're probably in a lot of pain too. And so that helps me take it a little less personally. Those are really the two main things. And just anytime someone comes to you and says, I'm sorry I snapped at you, or really I got angry, to say the words, I forgive you. Mm-hmm. Don't say, oh, it's no big deal. Oh, don't worry, that's not fine. You know what? It is not fine that you did that, but I forgive you.
I love that. It's like we're afraid of it.
Afraid of forgiveness?
Yeah. What is that? Is it because then we think we did the wrong thing, or that we hurt somebody, and that once again we hide under that, right? I think of all the grudges that I feel in people. Mm-hmm. You know, like that, the unsettled stomach, there's a family thing coming up and now they're anxious for 4 weeks knowing they need to talk to that person that wronged them, or mm-hmm. Whatever their perspective is. Okay.
I think that sometimes those or what we call it, what we used to do in my company is we used to bond over a mutual hatred. Like that was a really popular thing. You know, it's so easy to just like talk smack about that guy who yelled at you, or to just like complain about everything. And I think women in particular would sometimes have those grudges become part of their identity because that's what they talk to people about and that's what makes them relevant. And when if you forgive that person and that's water under the bridge, then who are you really?
Totally. Oh my gosh, you nailed it.
And so we have a rule in our company, we do not bond over mutual hatred anymore. We're just done with it. We either lift people up, or when someone's driving me nuts, I'm just like, child of God, child of God, child of God, because people do annoy me. I get annoyed real easy, but I won't complain about them. It's not helpful, and it doesn't, and it's not a good, and you know, and I'm a leader, so I have to be mindful. Because like you said earlier, when we were talking about when you're in your household, your kids are watching you, watching your example. They're watching how you act, how you respond. It's no different in your company. People are watching you and they're just absorbing your behaviors. And so if you think it's fine to talk about people, they think it's fine to talk about people.
Yep.
And I think that's what happens.
Yeah, I mean, the mirror is a dreaded thing, right? You think you're doing pretty well, and then all of a sudden your employee says or does something, and you're like, oh no, that's not good. That's me.
Yeah, yes.
Right? Like,
that just happened to me yesterday. I was like, where did you learn that? And then I was like, don't answer that. Don't answer it. I'm hanging up.
Oh goodness, that's like the worst ever. Kids, I mean, whoever, right? Anything that, whatever you're leading, they will show you the mirror if you're open to it. Can we talk about triggers?
Yes.
Like how to be aware of them, what they are, what they mean. Like I said, one of the things that sticks out with you is discernment. I find the majority of people have a very low threshold of discernment because they're judging themselves. They're not able to just see them as them, right? They're judging the good or bad with it. So if we're aware of our triggers, then it makes all of that worse if we're judging. So can we just talk about that?
Yeah, triggers are kind of a lifelong battle for everyone, I think.
Yep.
You know, it's amazing how our memories work, you know, as fragmented and crazy as they are, and how totally inaccurate most of the memories I have. When I go to my family, I'm like, hey, remember that time we did this? And they'll be like, we never did that. You know, my mind is always aware of memories and things like that. And so one of the most helpful things for overcoming triggers is when I am triggered is to not try and stop it.
Mm-hmm.
I just let it rip me open. And the whole time it's doing that, I'm kind of quietly observing the ripping open and think, wow, that's really curious. What about that really insignificant event just ripped me open? And the best thing ever in a trigger situation is you just can't judge yourself.
Yep.
You know, it's a non-judgmental. I like reading about Albert Einstein. I like reading about, you know, like Deep Work by Cal Newport is this book where he talks about Carl Jung getting up in the morning, doing his psychoanalysis stuff, and then kind of getting on with his day, going for a walk, not really coming back to anything. You know, like a lot of scientists, a lot of people just developed this curiosity. There were no problems. There was nothing functionally wrong with them. They're just curious about, oh, that didn't work. I wonder why. And so that's kind of how I approach triggers. It's more like a curious scientific brain of just like, wow, that really freaked me out. I wonder why. And that's curious. But I almost looking at it like there's something terribly wrong with me, or I get the shame gremlins, you know, where like I've embarrassed myself. I've embarrassed my family. I've embarrassed my son so many times with some stupid, like somebody makes a loud noise and suddenly I'm over in the corner shaking and bawling. Like, what is even happening? You know, so like it's embarrassing, but we laugh about it now, you know. But you can't really avoid triggers because there's like you can't anticipate them coming. It's just and again, back to that really crucial mind-body connection. When I talk about triggers, even Tiff, I get like a vagal break. Like my polyvagal is just like, oh, like my heart is a thumping right now, and I'm just talking about triggers. I'm not even experiencing one.
Your posture is totally different.
Yep. So like there's tension here. There's my survival brain is saying trigger. What trigger? What are you doing? Who's that? Is she safe? Where are you right now? That is just part of a traumatized brain. It's just like something that's, again, something I learned to live with, not something I try to get over.
Mm-hmm. Oh, what are your favorite books?
Well, I read like 3 or 4 books a week right now.
Yep.
I get up at 4, have a really nice morning routine that manages my anxiety. I get up between 4 and 5, usually 4. I'm reading the chronological Bible right now, which is fascinating. It reads like a novel. It's the best thing ever. I read one book always about trauma or psychology. I always have something going on there. I try to read like fiction once in a while, just to clean the palate, but mostly I'm reading nonfiction, self-improvement.
Yep.
So deep work, if you're someone who's constantly busy and never gets anything done, deep work might be the best book ever. Willpower Doesn't Work by Ben Hardy. Fantastic read about why willpower is not working for any of us and how the brain works with the body in that. The body keeps the score, of course, is like every trauma person's, manual for life.
Yeah.
So, I just have so many great books. If for leadership, Multipliers, best book I've ever read about leading people. And then Managing Leadership Anxiety is really meant for people who lead in churches, but it trickles into everything. It really talks about the people who come into your life and try to sabotage your good work and how to handle them without losing your mind. It's amazing.
What is it called? Which one is that?
Managing Leadership Anxiety.
Okay.
Yeah, and they teach you how to do a genogram in there. Are you familiar with genograms?
Yeah.
So that I learned how to do, and that was really fun. Fun and sad and scary, but whatever. It was mostly fun.
Let's focus on what helps us.
Yeah, right.
Oh, cool.
Right now I'm reading a book called Widen the Window by a PhD. Her name's Elizabeth Stanley, and she talks about how to take your trauma and really use it, how to really manage stress, but how to use that trauma to you can make a difference. You can still be everything that you set out to be, like it's not too late. So it's been an interesting read so far, but I'm not done with it.
All right. Do you have anything that you want to leave everyone with? This was been awesome.
I'm so glad it went well. There's a million little things that you can try to be better. So I would say if you've got something that's nagging at you or that's holding you back, just, take it out, look at it, see what happens.
I like that. Sorry, I'm writing notes. The take it out, look at it. I think that visual is amazing. I am a firm believer, well, whatever. Quiet time, meditation, breathing, whatever it is that brings more awareness to you, prayer, song. And the more we can take that piece out, investigate it, be curious about it, I think that is going to help people a ton. The majority of challenges I see right now are lack of awareness in how we feel. So therefore, there is no roadmap for people to even know what to do next, because we're stuck in the traumatic brain. We're stuck in the old brain. We're stuck in the trigger brain, right? Like all the not growth minded stuff. And so without knowing what it feels like to have your brain connected to your heart, connected to your gut, connected to your life, we don't even know where to start, right? We don't even know how to breathe.
Totally.
2 minutes of breathing could be a miracle for your life. To just feel innate, feel God, feel whatever it is in you, and to know that there's hope and belief that it can be different if you want it to be different. It can be better.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Getting in touch with your body is something.
Yep. Okay. Anything else, my friend?
No, but you've been lovely to talk with, as always.
So are you. You said something before we started recording on you just never knew what you're going to get if you played basketball with Tiff.
True.
It's probably the same as if you podcast with him. Who knows? Who knows what's coming down the pipeline?
I know. It was really like, you knew you were going to laugh. That's all you knew. But what was going to come out of your mouth? No concept. Couldn't have guessed.
Oh gosh. See, I always considered myself to be a follower in high school. I mean, I was in my own right? Like what I felt, and it's so interesting in being in interviewing people that I've known for so long, and that, as we go through life, we have these identities that we move through, and some we liked and some we didn't like. And some we frankly didn't even know, because we didn't know how to see ourselves from the corner of the room, right? We didn't know how to observe. We didn't know how to be curious about who we were. And then we talk to people like you. I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting. That maybe goes against what I maybe thought I was back then, right?
Interesting. Yeah, no, I never thought you were a follower. Not for 1 second.
What?
No, I thought you had your groupies. Like, everyone had their groupies in high school. We did our thing, whatever. And then maybe we were influenced by each other. Of course we were. But like, I always thought someone who was like a follower was always afraid to go out and meet new people or go outside of their circle. I mean, that ain't you. You were so far out of your circle all the time. It was like, you gave me a lot of confidence. Like, to say that I was friends with Tiff Irie, just like I said to Sarah, to say that Sarah Newgard was my friend in high school brought me an enormous amount of confidence, because for you guys to be friends with me meant I couldn't have been that bad, right? Because I just felt like you'd have found me out and you'd have spat me out, but it never happened. And so I must have been okay. And so I got a lot of confidence because you were always just so glowy and beautiful and like, so like there, whatever it was, you were there, and you were owning it. And I always like loved that. I always really gravitated towards that. So you just don't know what impressions you make on people. You maybe didn't know that you gave me that, but you did. So did Sarah. Makes a huge difference. And I go back to that sometimes, and like, we had a lot of fun together.
We totally.
So much fun. And you made me feel like I could be myself. And I think you do that for a lot of people. And I think you should never ever give that up.
Oh, we're teary.
No one will see it. It's fine. We could cry a little. Good for you.
Well, tears are different than F-bombs, so at least we have them.
They are a little similar.
Well, and the saying goes, you just never know how far reaching someone can affect who they are, what they do, say, think, however that quote sounds. Because I think we as individuals have an effed up perspective of who we were in those places, because we saw brokenness, we saw trauma, right? We didn't see brilliance, we didn't see confidence, so as the beauty of friends and the beauty of friend groups, of how you pull off so many people, if you have the courage to go back into that uncomfortable place of me thinking that I felt like a follower because I felt like I was always uncomfortable. But you're right, like that's interesting. Ooh, I think a blog or something new is coming, because like, how there's parts of us that have been with us the whole time. Yeah. That if we can look through that path of how we did it then, creating a safe space for people to express themselves and explore. I'd say I always did that. And how that's just morphed. It didn't mean that I necessarily wasn't doing that. Same with
Right.
you. It didn't mean that you weren't confident during that time, because I think if anyone knew you, they didn't think you had to pull confidence from anybody. So, right? How we see each other is so different from the purity of lens versus how we can start to see our soul. And what if we started to see our soul in that godlike, purpose-like way? Can you imagine humanity?
I can. I think it would be pretty great.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of our goals is to start to imagine humanity whole.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, all of it, right? The shadow bits, good bits, beautiful bits, the bits from when we were 5, when we bit our brother's finger and we never said we were sorry. All of those bits, they're all welcome. They're all here. They're all used for all kinds of modeling and shaping. You know, they are what God gave us.
Right.
We should use them.
Yes. Yes. Oh, this was beautiful, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you. This was wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much. And I am curious to know more about your aligned life and how that takes off, and all the people that you've been helping.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So
and we
keep doing what you're doing.
I will, you too. And you should be writing your book. You are, right?
I have some books in the hopper, but I have resistance.
Yeah.
Still a little imposter syndrome.
Yeah. So what would happen if you would put the glasses on that you see me through?
Like how I see you? Like
So,
look at myself how I see?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, that's asking a lot. Yeah, that's a really great question. I don't have an answer for that. Maybe we'll try it on. Take it out of the pocket, try it on, look at it. See what it
Totally.
looks like.
It's kind of like, well, it reminds me of Adam Sandler, you know, the little kid, the 5-year-old that would put his glasses on when he didn't want to be seen.
Yeah.
So what would happen if you just use different glasses? You could start to see your paper look different, because you could start to channel that soul without imposter syndrome, without fraud, without guilt.
A fascinating idea. I will take a selfie wearing some sunglasses if I decide to go down that road, and I will send it to you. And then when you see my book on the shelf, you'll be like, see, she never would have written it if it wasn't for this podcast. I'll give you a shout out in the foreword.
They'll be famous too.
All right.
Okay.
Well, you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Love you, friend. Thank you for listening and following the Aligned Life podcast with Dr. Tiffany. If you love this and can think of anyone who needs to hear about it, would you mind sharing with them? Find me online at drtiffanyjohnson.com, where you can find out more about my memberships, courses, mentoring, and any upcoming events. To learn more about chiropractic for you and your family, go to htchiro.com and follow our social pages. I can't wait to connect with you soon, and until then, be you, be aligned.